Good morning. Today we are continuing with chapter 12. Yesterday we talked about those key terms. Who can tell me what urban is? Ethan? Of or relating to the city. And of course my pen is not wanting to work again. Let's see if we can get this to work. All right. Okay, let's see if it'll work now. Of or relating to the city. So if that's urban, what is rural? Ryan? Of or relating to the countryside. Where do we live? Do we live in the urban or the rural? Gavin? We live in between. We live in the suburbs. So suburban means we are just outside of the urban area. We are not in that downtown area. So the urban is that downtown, lots of big factories and buildings. Rural's in the countryside, lots of green grass. So cement in the city, grass in the country. Who are the working class, Sam?
People getting paid hourly wages. They work labor.
People being paid hourly wages. And usually, you're right, usually they are doing physical labor. What is a boom? Chase?
A period of rapid growth in population or economic activity.
Period of rapid growth in the population or economic activity. Yesterday we talked about the rapid growth in population, about the baby boom after World War II. What is another way we could have a rapid growth in the population without lots of babies being born? What's a different way we could have a big growth in population, Brielle? People moving in. Could be from other states, could be from other countries. So think about Minnesota, the turn of the century, going into the 1900s. Who do you think is going to be coming into our state? Is our population boom going to be from babies being born? Is it going to be from people moving in? What do you think, Sam?
Probably from immigrants, I guess.
It's a good guess that it would be from immigrants. One, that's part of our title of our chapter is immigrants. So we know immigrants are going to play a big part in this chapter. So it's a good thought. We've already learned about some immigrants that have come from like Germany, from Norway and Sweden area. So we know that immigrants are starting to come in. We know there's lots of farmland that people were coming for. We're going to find out what the cities had that were also calling for people to come in. What is a labor union? Julian?
An organization that helps workers get better wages and working conditions.
It's an organization that helps workers get better wages and working conditions. Remember, those factories had lots of dangerous machines, and the Owners didn't necessarily care how dangerous they were, they just wanted to turn that profit. So they wanted people to work long hours, they wanted people to make the fixes super quick, they wanted people to move fast. So they didn't have the best working conditions. So the unions helped to say, no, we need to be safe in our working. We need to make sure that we have lunch breaks. We can't work from sunup to sundown without a break. We need to be able to sit down. Otherwise, we get too tired and we make mistakes and accidents happen. So the labor union helps to make sure that the workers are taken care of, that they're not being taken advantage of, they're not being worked too hard, that they're being compensated for the work, that they have just pay. Okay, sometimes they'll say, oh, you're an immigrant, you don't have a job, you'll take anything, so we're going to pay you a really small amount. That's not fair, it's not right. So the labor union makes sure that they're getting the right amount of money for the type of work that they're doing. If they're not getting the right amount of money, or they're not in a safe condition, what can the workers do? Sam?
They can go on a strike.
They can go on strike. So what is a strike?
Refusing to work until a company meets what they want.
Until their demands are met. So when the workers refuse to work until their demands are met. So they can say, hey, you're not giving us a lunch break. You're not giving us a lunch break. We need to be able to eat during the day. This is not safe. It's not healthy. So we're going to go on strike until you finally give in and give us our break. Give us our pay raise. Give us whatever it is that you're withholding from us that we deserve to have. So they can go on strike for that. Keep in mind that when people go on strike, they don't get any money during that time. So the workers don't want to be on strike. They want to be working, making money. Okay, they have bills to pay. They need to be able to buy food to put on their table. So it's not a good thing for anybody for there to be a strike. The workers don't want it. The employees don't want it. The employers don't want it, because if the workers aren't working, then they're not making any kind of profit. So nobody wants a strike. So strikes usually are very short-lived, because they want to come to that compromise as soon as possible so they can get back to work, so the company can start making more money, so the employees can get their wages and be making money. Our last one is a citizen. Paul.
Someone who's born or is naturalized into their own country and is entitled by birth.
So it's a person born or naturalized into a country and they're entitled to the rights given by the government. So if you were born here in the United States, you are automatically a United States citizen. So just being born here makes you a United States citizen. If somebody comes in as an immigrant, they are not a United States citizen. They can live here and work here, but they don't have all the same rights as a citizen of the United States. They can't vote. That's the first big right that they don't have. They don't get to choose who the elected officials are. They can't vote for people. They can't run for any office. You have to be a citizen in order to be a part of that process. Somebody that comes in, like Mr. Gambino's dad came from Italy. He lived here for quite a few years. See, they got married in 1959, and he didn't become a citizen until, I think it was in the 1990s. So he lived here a long time before he became a citizen. But finally he decided, you know what, I'm here, I know I'm staying, I want to be a part of the process. I want to be a true American. So he took classes, he studied, he had to take the test. We talked about that test yesterday. You learning about American history, you're learning about the American government, how it all works. So you can be a contributing member of society. You can contribute to America. Is your hand up or are you stretching? Yeah, under.
There's this episode of Modern Family where I forget her name, but the wife of the old guy, she takes a
Gloria.
Yeah, she takes a citizenship test.
Does she?
And she answers she answers one question correctly, and then there's like a cheat flag, but she printed it out, so like she has this exam, and then she got mad and asked for another question.
Because she got the one wrong.
She got it right, but she thought she like needed more questions.
Oh.
So she got mad, and then the person asked a question that she couldn't answer, so she just left.
So she did not become a citizen?
She did.
Okay. And that's a comedy, so it's not really based in reality on how things really work. I did get to do a field trip once to the courthouse to witness a naturalization ceremony where people became American citizens, which is really cool to see. They were very excited to become a part of America, to fully belong to our country. So it's really neat thing to be able to witness. Paul shared how he helped his mom study for the test. So it is a process that they have to go through. They study a lot. They learn a lot of history and a lot about our government, sometimes more than what natural-born citizens know because we didn't have to study it as hard. Naveen?
My dad
did he? Okay, very cool. So do you remember when he was studying for that test or not really?
Studying, but I remember going.
Okay, so you got to go and watch him become a citizen? Very cool. So yeah, we have a few families in here that have close relations to going through that process, which was really cool. All right, let's look at chapter 12, page 241, immigrants, labor, cities. Business owners and their employees worked to build the state's new industries during the early 1900s, although they sometimes disagreed about working conditions and pay. Workers flooded into cities from other countries and states, as well as from Minnesota's rural areas. Discover the stories of two workers, one on the Iron Range and one in Minneapolis. So when there's that big population growth, it could be immigrants coming from the other countries. It could be people moving here from other states. Maybe they lived out on the East Coast and they wanted to come out to Minnesota because they've heard wonderful things. Maybe they were on a farm here in Minnesota and they wanted to move to the big city because they wanted a different life. They didn't want the farm life. So the cities grew from lots of different people coming in. Throughout the 1800s, most of the people who settled in Minnesota came from eastern states or from northern European countries such as England, Ireland, Germany, Norway, and Sweden. So if we look over at that map, we can see where those countries are. So you can see the different countries that we pulled immigrants from. People from these countries continued to immigrate to Minnesota in large numbers into the 1900s. By the 1890s, however, more and more immigrants from other parts of Europe began to arrive in Minnesota. Some came from other northern countries, such as Finland, and many came from the southern, central, and eastern parts of the continent, from countries such as Italy, Greece, Poland, and Croatia. Many were Roman Catholic, Orthodox Christian, or Jewish. So in my family, I know my grandpa came from Croatia. So he came, probably he was here for World War II. So in the 1940s. So he probably came in the 1920s, 1930s from Croatia. So just a little bit past this time. he actually came to Wisconsin, which there's a lot of similarity between the nationalities in Wisconsin and Minnesota. There's a lot of overlap. So a lot of German, a lot of Croatian, those areas also went to Wisconsin. Most of Minnesota's good farmland had been claimed by 1890. So new immigrants usually settled in cities and other places where they could get jobs. Remember, there was that big push in the 1850s, 1860s with the Homestead Act to get all these people in to have the farms. So now the farmland's all taken up. So where can they go? They can go to the city where these big factories are now booming. Remember how that flower industry just was taking off? So these factories are growing. They have jobs for these immigrants coming in. Some of them headed north to Biwabik, Tower, and Crosby. There, mining companies were pulling tons of iron ore from the Mesabi, Vermilion, and Cuyuna ranges. Others landed in Minneapolis, where the flour and lumber industries were in constant need of workers. So what we learned about the last chapter, how those three industries were growing bigger, they were growing bigger because they had more workers coming. And those workers, a lot of them were immigrants. Like most immigrants, these new arrivals formed communities in which they could speak their own languages and practice their own customs. Immigrants from Germany often lived among other Germans. Immigrants from Italy often lived in Italian neighborhoods. Immigrants from Finland often lived near other Finns. So if you think about it, if you were to move to Germany and you spoke English, would you want to live in a German neighborhood where everybody speaks German and you can't understand them? Oh, you're going to be scared and lonely and confused. So you're going to find where's there other Americans? People like me who understand me and I understand them, and we have similarities. So you're going to settle in an area where there's other people speaking English. So you have somebody to talk with who can help show you around, help you learn about this new country. So it's natural for people to settle in areas with other people like them. It's different in in the United States. If you move from Minnesota down to Florida, we all speak the same language. We all have similar type backgrounds. But when you're going to a different country, it's very common for the big cities to have neighborhoods. Mr. Gambino's grandparents lived in Little Italy in Chicago. So there's a whole neighborhood where they speak Italian. They have Italian delis so they can get the food that is similar to the food back home. I know that there's different markets in Minneapolis and in St. Paul where they have ethnic specialties. So if you're from like the Hmong background, you could go to certain markets and they would have food like you would find back in your home country. So you'd be able to cook the same way. I know for Mr. Gambino, he likes a certain type of cheese to make his lasagna. And Cub Foods doesn't sell the same kind of ricotta that he gets back home in Chicago. So we had to search and find a type of cheese, a store that sells the ricotta cheese just like his mom buys to make lasagna. So people like to have their specific foods. It's not just any food will do. They want it to have that same flavor, that same texture of what they could get back home. So they really search for these. So these neighborhoods that have these specialty stores really help them feel at home.
Whenever we have like Christmas or Easter,
Mhm.
we go to like the Polish deli in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and we get like the pierogies from there and Polish sausage. So that's kind of like our
it's kind of the same idea. So you're not immersed in the Polish community, but you know certain pieces of it and you know where to go to find the good stuff. You can't just go to Cub Foods to get the good pierogies. You have to go to those certain places. And still in big cities, they still have these neighborhoods where they have the special ethnic places. Andrea.
My family likes to make arepas,
Mhm.
but before they didn't have it in Target, and I was really sad. So whenever we ran out of arepa we had to go to this store that sold it, and it was like 40 minutes away.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that actually one day on my birthday, they got held up in a hostage.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, there are people that make bad choices like that. It happens. But yeah, we will go to a deli in St. Paul, which is like 35 minutes away, to get certain Italian foods that we can only find there. Paul?
When my mom was moving to our new house,
Mhm.
she made sure that all the foods that we usually eat in like they would eat in Africa or stuff
Mhm.
were there. So that's what my mom did to have
Sure.
stuff.
Yep, and that makes sense that when you're moving to a new location, you're going to make sure you have easy access to the types of stores that make you feel at home. That makes sense. Andrea?
Never.
So, especially back then, because English wasn't as common of a language as it is now, a lot of the immigrants coming in didn't speak English at all. Now, when immigrants come in, sometimes they know a little bit of English. They might not know any, but they might know some because English has become more widespread of a language. So, there's a little bit breakdown of that barrier, that language barrier. But back in the 1900s, beginning of the 1900s, they were completely lost. So they would settle with people who spoke like them, who made the same types of food as they made, who had the same kind of values and culture that they had, because it made them feel more at home so they wouldn't be as homesick. It was a common pattern and an understandable one. Learning the ways of a new country could be difficult. When they weren't working, many newcomers were glad to spend their time with people more like themselves. Cities grow quickly. So you can see up in that picture traffic jams such as this one in 1905 at the corner of 6th and Nicollet Avenues in Minneapolis were common. So look at the different modes of transportation just in this picture. So what are some different ways that people were getting around the city, Colin? There was a bicycle, so they would bike places. Molly?
There's someone walking.
There's somebody walking, using their feet. Sam?
There's a car.
There's a car. Ryan?
It's like a train.
Yeah, it's called a trolley. I think that's a trolley. Yeah. So there were different ways to get around. So the trolley would be like a bus, like that type of public transportation. There's not too many trolleys that are actually used today. I know San Francisco has a good trolley system. But like now we have the commuter train, we have buses, the city buses. But back then they had the trolley system. Yes.
No, I think that's just a Model T.
Well, there is the Model T. Yes, that is the one of the first cars. Horse-drawn carriages were popular back then still too. So I think that is a horse-drawn carriage. You can't see the horse, but we just know that those type of carriages were pulled by horses. So lots of different ways that they were getting around. Minnesota's, well, and before I start reading, it says that there's a traffic jam. What do we have now that makes traffic jams a lot less, Naveen?
Stoplights.
Stoplights. What else do we have, Mia?
Stop signs.
Stop signs. So first stop signs came because that's just a sign. Then once electricity got more common and easier to spread, stop lights became more common. So first it started with stop signs saying, hey, instead of having everybody trying to get through that intersection at the same time, let's make it more organized. So that's why stop signs came to be, because otherwise people were just stuck in the middle of the road. So they had stop signs come, and then years down the road when electricity was, they were able to, the technology got better, they were able to set up stoplights. Minnesota's urban areas or cities were bursting with people at the turn of the 20th century. Minneapolis especially had grown beyond most people's expectations. In 1880, Minneapolis's population was about 46,000. So that's less than what Coon Rapids has right now. Because I know Coon Rapids has, I think it was like, last I heard, 59,000. in the suburb. So think about how much bigger the city is. Colin?
This city only has a little over 15,000.
Which city is that? Ham Lake. Yeah, Ham Lake is a little bit more spread out. It's getting more towards the countryside of things. So it's bigger land area that people own. So there's going to be less people. So yeah, that would make sense. There's a smaller population there. By 1890, it had jumped to 165,000. So in 10 years, it jumped up over 100,000 people. So that's a huge population boom. Okay, it grew really quickly. Coon Rapids isn't growing that quickly. We kind of just stay about the same. Okay, we don't have a big boom going on. Minneapolis in 10 years grew over 100,000 people. The population reached 203,000 in 1900 and 301,000 in 1910. So in 20 years, it grew 250,000. Minneapolis was not alone. Other cities in the state experienced similar, although less dramatic growth. By 1920, more than 40% of the people in Minnesota lived in urban areas, up from 15% in 1870. These new urban dwellers had come from many different places in Minnesota and across the country. Some were from rural areas such as farms and small towns in Minnesota. These men and women were often young people who liked the excitement of the city and considered it a place of opportunity. Others had come from other parts of the United States. Among them were African Americans who had left their homes in the southern part of the country in hopes of finding good-paying jobs in northern states. In addition, many new immigrants came to Minnesota from other countries. Some joined fellow countrymen and women who had immigrated decades before. Others came from countries that were unfamiliar to many native-born Minnesotans. They settled mainly in the areas of Duluth, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, where others from the working class lived. So a lot of times when those immigrants were coming over, they didn't have a lot of education for the more professional jobs. They didn't have money to be buying the factories and owning the factories, so they became the working class because that's all that they were able to do when they first came over. And we are going to stop there for today. So for those of you at home, we hope you are well and we hope to see you soon.